Live from Fargo and serving you on TV, online, and on the go. This is Valley News Live at 5.
Quite a bit life-threatening, some serious head injuries, bleeding around the brain, inside the brain, broken bones, things like that.
Sanford Hospital says it's seeing an increase in patients visiting the ER with serious injuries from domestic violence. On top of that, there's been an 18% increase in 911 calls in the Valley for domestic calls. Valley News Team's Joshua Pagero talks to those on the front lines who say the pandemic may have made things worse.
Sanford doctors and nurses are on the front lines of saving lives and fighting off the coronavirus pandemic. But another thing on their plate is an increase in people stopping by the emergency room with serious injuries.
We're seeing a doubling of stabbings and overall assaults where people are just beating on each other, that sort of thing. And disturbingly, we're also seeing a doubling, a little bit more than doubling of pediatric child abuse cases.
Dr. Jeff Tiongson works in the ER, and he's treated some of these patients.
I have 5 kids of my own, and when you kind of think of these patients and they're around the same age as some of your kids, or you think back on that, it's literally impossible not to have that affect you in some way.
Law enforcement is immediately contacted when a child shows up with serious injuries. As the numbers double, Dr. Tiongson says it makes sense to him that being isolated in a home may be a reason for the increase. Numbers from Fargo Police show an increase in calls for service compared to last year. Before it escalates that a victim of domestic violence has to visit an emergency room, there are other resources available in the Fargo-Moorhead area where they can get assistance. The YWCA, which has an emergency shelter, says women continue to call asking for help, and they continue to welcome women and kids. First Link has a call helpline, and they say they've taken more than 1,000 calls. They're reporting an increase of 500 people calling for suicide compared to last year. Chris Johnson of the Rape and Abuse Crisis Center in Fargo says his agency saw a decrease in the beginning of the outbreak.
Overall, our productivity, if you will, dropped about 20%, which is pretty alarming for us because, we have 43 years of pretty consistent programming data.
Johnson says things are starting to pick back up now.
There's a lot of risk for a victim to reach out to the system for help when they're in a domestic violence situation. And so a victim really has to weigh that risk.
He says domestic violence is a hard cycle to break, but it can be achieved with help. In Fargo, Joshua Pagero, Valley News Live.
If you need confidential help or support, you can call 211 24/7 for immediate service. State health officials are reporting the largest single-day increase in cases since the virus reached North Dakota. 134 more people have tested positive for COVID-19, bringing the total to 2,229 confirmed cases. 2 more deaths have been linked to COVID-19, both men in Cass County with underlying health conditions. One in his 70s and the other was in his 90s. 1,340 patients are listed as recovered. The Cass County Sheriff's Office says 10 people have now tested positive after mass testing at the county jail. 5 of the positive tests are from staff and 5 are from inmates. All of the people who tested positive did not show any symptoms. The sheriff says plans are in place to limit the spread. The testing was done this past Tuesday, and authorities expect more results to become available over the next few days. In Minnesota, state health officials are confirming 539 new cases of COVID-19, along with 32 additional deaths. The state is reporting a total of 18,200 cases, an increase of 539 from the day before. The death toll increased by 32 for a total of 809. 663 of the deaths happened in long-term care facilities. 12,488 people are listed as recovered. Let's find out if our nice day will turn into a nice evening. Here's Hutch with a look at the First Alert forecast. Hey, Hutch.
Hardly even notice the wind out there anymore. It's just that gusty wind all week long. It's part of our life, I guess, as we have gusts still over 30 miles per hour for many of us. Still out of the south-southeast, temperatures fairly mild. There are some clouds tonight, and the change is going to be a few sprinkles out to the west. Notice, though, as we take a look, they're spreading from Highway 2 north into the Langdon area, and over the last hour have not moved all that much. So hit and miss sprinkles of rain. Most of us will stay dry. Here's your planner for Fargo. You can see some darker clouds with a few rain shafts off in the distance from our Valley Sky Cam. Slipping into the 60s after sunset tonight in Fargo, likewise for Grand Forks, similar. Rain becomes more likely for us tonight and into the day tomorrow. I'll have hour-by-hour details on the close of your work week here in a minute.
Okay, thanks, Hutch. Police say a man threatened to kill another man just 1 minute before running him over in the West Acres Mall parking lot. Witnesses and a security camera saw the victim walking across the mall's parking lot before being hit by Jason Anderson's vehicle. The victim fell to the ground, and while he was trying to get back up, Anderson allegedly sped up and drove over him. Anderson reportedly got out of the car and punched and kicked the man several times. That victim is in a hospital in stable condition with many serious injuries. Anderson is currently in the Cass County Jail. 2 men are now in custody after a police standoff in Moorhead that closed off part of the neighborhood. Officials say it happened around 5:30 yesterday evening. It started with a call from someone who said a man had pointed a gun at them at a home in the 400 block of 16th Street South. Officers had guns drawn and ordered people inside the house to come out. 31-year-old Courtney Smith was arrested for domestic assault. 21-year-old Trayvon Spears was arrested for assault and possession of stolen property in relation to the threat involving the firearm. Authorities in Eddy County are asking for the public's help in finding a man who stole money from an ATM. Authorities say the man on your screen walked into the all-hours lobbies of 2 banks in New Rockford and Carrington, North Dakota, and stole money from the ATM. Deputies aren't saying how much money was stolen or how the man broke into the ATM. The burglaries happened early yesterday morning. If you have any information about this man, you're urged to call authorities at the phone number on your screen, 947-5515. Officials with Essentia Health say roughly 900 people will be laid off due to the impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. The hospital says operational losses at Essentia Health have totaled nearly $100 million because of a decline in patient volumes from the pandemic. They say 850 essential workers are on administrative leave with benefits through July 31st, with the intention of being called back to work as needed. For more information on this story, you can head over to our VNL News app. With many long days, oftentimes responding to dangerous situations, on top of navigating COVID-19, a police officer's mental health can suffer. In 2019 alone, over 220 officers committed suicide after battling the stress and trauma that comes with the job. But one local department is trying to fight back, telling Valley News Team's crime and safety reporter, Bailey Hurley, it's not only helping officers, but the community as well.
From homicides to traffic stops, law enforcement officers see it all, and sometimes all in one day.
We just had a recent officer start here that in the first 4 months on the job went to 9 different suicide calls, and 4 of those calls were suicides by hanging. And if you can imagine how that accumulates over a 32-year career.
Chief Monroe says previously mental health help was usually only offered after critical incidents like Destiny Avery's murder. Otherwise, services were only available off-site.
For them to go out there and deal with the things they did in looking for this young lady in a landfill, those images get burned into their mind, and that might come back up, and it could be a day later, a week later, or years later.
But now Moorhead Police is working to get ahead of the curve, now partnering with MSUM and embedding a mental health expert in the department to help officers before it's too late.
At the time when I started, we were still kind of in the just rub some dirt on it and go back to work kind of a thing. And it's not like that anymore because of the problems that we've seen with police-related suicides, alcoholism, and
wellness coordinator Aaron Sumala-Folkert says he's specifically working to help officers at the beginning of their careers rather than only when something happens, while also working on what he calls psychological resilience, helping officers deal with trauma as they're experiencing it.
But then also strategies for after when they go home.
He adds his presence in the building will help fight the stigma of seeking services, as well as help officers better serve the community. In Moorhead, Bailey Hurley, Valley News Live.
Moorhead police say the new 2-year program was paid for by civil forfeitures, which is the money seized in incidents like drug busts and DUIs. The Senate is still at odds over who's doing the most work inside the Capitol building, with Republicans criticizing the House for their long absence, and Democrats are hitting back, saying that the Senate is at a standstill when it comes to advancing COVID-19 legislation.
At this point, I'm wondering if we should send senators over there to collect their newspaper and water the plants. It's not just their physical absence, Madam President. It's House Democrats' absence from any serious discussions at all.
Senator Chuck Schumer says Leader McConnell called the Senate back into session 3 weeks ago, and in that time, the Republican leadership has not put one bill on the floor in the Senate related to COVID-19. Some families were venturing out to Fargo Parks today. They reopened after being closed for a few weeks due to the coronavirus pandemic. We stopped by a few of them this afternoon and didn't see large crowds. Parks officials are still asking you to practice social distancing at the parks and to use your own hand sanitizer when you're finished playing. One 11-year-old tells us he couldn't wait to get out of the house.
It was boring, but I ate a lot of food and got fat, and then I watched Netflix and stuff, did that, and I went outside a few times.
I think he's not alone in those thoughts. The Fargo Park District also says you may use your own antibacterial wipes to clean any surfaces prior to playing. Still ahead tonight, they're not your typical delivery team, but they're getting a lot of requests during this pandemic.
And many of you out asking for a relief from the wind. Temperatures still pretty fair, 70s for almost all of us to near 80 degrees. But the gusty winds continue. I'll tell you when they'll stop, and we'll track the rain showers through the region next.